Hello, everyone, and welcome to Anatomy of an Adaptation. This is a podcast that aims to compare and contrast classic novels with their cinematic adaptations. I'm your host, Nicolo Grasso, and I am joined today once again by the great film critic, podcaster, film lover, Carson Timar. How are you doing, Carson? So happy to have you back on the show.
Yes, I'm so excited to be back, Nick. Thank you for having me. This has been one that we've talked about doing for a while, so I'm super pumped to be here and actually be getting this on audio, getting it recorded, because I think it's going to be a fun one, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, I'm sure it will be. It's been in the oven for quite some time because I remember already back in 2022, 2023, I first watched the show and I was thinking this could be a very interesting episode to do for the podcast, but then there was the hiatus, then we came back, but there were some breaks still in between, and things happened, but now finally we're here to sit down to talk about everything related to Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, the 1994 film directed by Neil Jordan, and the 2022 show by Rollin James.
Why do you do this, Lestat?
Well, I like to do it. I enjoy it.
Well, I don't. You don't have to humiliate him. Well, I don't say that you have to enjoy it! Kill them swiftly if you have to, but do it! Embrace what you are! You are a killer, Louis!
I'm very curious, Carson, what are your thoughts on Anne Rice's novel, published in 1976? A one of the most important vampire novels ever written, we could say, kind of brought on a new life, new blood into the genre after it was starting to stagnate, after, Bram Stoker's Dracula and many imitators that came after. She changed the rules in a way. She changed the game. She embraced sensuality in a different manner. She brought these characters from Gothic literature into the modern world we're living in. I'm curious, what was it like for you reading this book for the first time?
What if vampires were gay? No, like I literally. So to be clear, I watched the movie a couple years ago, fell in love with it, and I was like, I
Nice.
think maybe you messaged me or I messaged you, and it was like, oh my gosh, I would love to do this episode. So I read the book and I watched the show in preparation specifically for this podcast. So it's not like I have a long history with them, but revisiting or not revisiting, but just visiting the book, revisiting the story from
Mhm.
the movie. I love the book. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great book. Anne Rice
Hot
does
take.
it.
Hot
And yeah,
take.
hot take. It's a little better than Twilight, even I have to say. No, I mean, it's a great story, and we'll talk about that story in many formats today, in many
Mhm.
forms. But when it comes to having a practical look at what life as a vampire is like, the drama, the sacrifice, the heartbreak, the suffering of being a vampire, this story is phenomenal,
Mhm.
especially in the book. I mean, and this is something where a big conversation today, because we have these three different forms of storytelling, is going to be talking about what each medium and each format allows. And in a book, you get to spend so much time in the minds of these characters. You get to go inside the mind of a vampire, whether they're watching people to hunt, whether they are having a certain connection where they realize that they feel isolated because these are the only people who understand what you are going through. You are stuck with them for life. Um, there's so much here that works so well. Are there certain parts of the book, especially, that feel maybe a little bit weird? And it's not one where like it was written in an ancient time and now is aged weirdly. Specifically, the use of enslaved people is certainly strange. It reads as very uncomfortable. It feels like Anne Rice didn't want to deal, like, for everything she wants to confront and do with vampires. The
Mhm.
kind of classic issue with the vampire narrative is that they need to kill people so to drink their blood and survive. So naturally, any vampire text that's looking at like practically being a vampire for an extended amount of time has to deal with this element. And it feels like Anne Rice was like, well, that's a way we can deal with this if they're just killing and eating enslaved people, because they also a not plantain, plantation owner. It feels like Anne Rice was like, well, that's a clever way that we can do this, and then not also deal with like the practicality of that of having
Mhm.
to kill random people. Certainly it's weird. It's weird to have these main characters who are like, you love them and they're queer and it has all this stuff, implied queerness, to be clear, at least in this book.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that.
And then they're also just like kind of horrible people who like own and eat slaves and like basically use slaves as like cattle for them that they're
Yeah.
owning. It's aged is weird, but I would say still the story absolutely works. It lands. We'll get to the differences between all the versions, but I think that's enough for my opening thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely want to get into some of those thematic elements or lack of thematic elements. I think that's the biggest criticism we can make about the book for sure. But I love this book. This is one of my all-time favorites because I had this period in time, and I think I mentioned it on some other episodes over the years, but I had a period in time where I started to become really, really attracted by horror as a genre in general, and especially horror cinema, but it always felt a bit too risque. It felt a bit too strong to watch. I was a bit too afraid for it. So literature was safer in a way to experience. And so Interview with the Vampire is one of those books I read when I was 13 to 14 years old, something like that. And I was blown away by it. I was really engaged and enthralled. I was already familiar with Dracula by Bram Stoker. It's a novel I'd read also around the same time. So I was always fascinated by vampires, the allure, the mystique, the sensuality, things that I couldn't even really understand um, on a conscious level when I was younger, but it definitely kind of put their roots into me and fostered over the years. And it is a book that I've read at this point almost four times. I think it's the book I've read the most reread the most in my life, which is something I don't usually do, except for the podcast. And it's like you said, it still works. I think the entire relationship between Louis de Poindulac and Lestat de Lioncourt, it's fascinating. The way Anne Rice brings these characters to life, the entire framing device honestly is also brilliant, of having Louis in 1970 in San Francisco being interviewed by Daniel Molloy, this young journalist who's getting basically a scoop by interviewing a real vampire who has to prove to him that he is a real vampire, demystifying some of the myths, explaining the tragedy of it all in a way that now we almost take for granted. I feel like vampire literature prior to Anne Rice, of course there are exceptions, I don't want to generalize too much, but they generally portray them as villains. They didn't usually have them in protagonist roles. They could be complicated figures, they could have some edges to them. We talked about the universal classics a lot. Bela Lugosi's interpretation of Dracula has some of those elements for sure, even in the sequels. But it's not until Interview with the Vampire becomes a phenomenon where they can become anti-heroes, they can become the protagonists. We can actually turn them in a way that they are relatable. They have human flaws and human desires, but they just, are doomed to never see sunlight again, and they cannot uh, grow old with the people that they love. And if they love anyone, they either have to kill them or turn them immortal and doom them in the same way. So she injected a lot of tragedy and humanity in the genre that we're still seeing nowadays. I think you would not have something like Only Lovers Left Alive by Jim Jarmusch without Anne Rice's writing. Even though, side note here, because I'm pretty sure this is the only one you've read of the entire Vampire Chronicles. I've only read also the second book, The Vampire Lestat. The entire saga is daunting in a way that genuinely puts me off. I apologize to any Anne Rice faithful who's listening to this episode. I might give them a chance, at least to the third one, Queen of the Damned, because I also like the movie of that one. It's a fun watch, but it's a lot to get into, and those books are not light reads. They get longer and longer as they go on. But as a standalone, I think there is a purity to Interview with the Vampire that makes it work. And to kind of get into what you were saying of some of the themes, I love how much queerness is present in the story without ever explicitly becoming so. I know some of the fans have kind of rationalized it as you're experiencing this from Louis' perspective and is still very upset and distraught by everything that happened with Lestat, so he doesn't want to say nice things about him and he hides the explicit romance that they had. But honestly, for you, it's like, yeah, we can rationalize it like that. But it's still 1976. It's a book that's going for a major audience, mainstream audience. It was successful, I think, also because it hid the queerness in plain sight. You have to be blind to not even perceive some of that in this book. But I do have to agree with you that she's very much not interested in some of the repercussions of setting this in New Orleans, in a plantation in the opening chapters, in having slaves be treated like cattle. It is something that we can potentially even turn it as like that's the point, but she has shown so much empathy and love for other people. Here, the slave element feels more like a necessity. It's like, oh, I'm setting it in this point in time. Yeah, this makes sense, so they can hide, but there's no implied social commentary, at least from my perspective. I don't know if you have more that you would like to add about that.
I mean, not really. Again, I don't think that there was necessarily reading a ton there that was overly like. I don't think that's ever the purpose. Even in the scenes or the segments of the book where that takes place, which is not the whole book,
Mm.
but for some of it, it
Yeah.
never feels like it's like the focus to where, even compared to some of the implied queerness, I would say that's clearly much more of a focus than anything with the enslaved people. It's just like it's one of those elements, and I don't know what the vibe was like in 1994 or whenever. When was this published? 94 was it?
76.
Oh, 76. Just kidding. The book
94 is the
itself was
movie.
okay.
94 is the movie, yeah.
That's where I'm getting across. See, I don't know the vibe in 76. I still feel like it probably would have read weird there also. Like it just like I don't know. It's such it's such a pointed like element, and then you just don't really do anything with it. But alas, I mean, luckily again, that is I mean, literally maybe a quarter of the book is relating to this time. Like it moves on from that very quickly. I also was a big fan of the queerness. I'm a big fan, obviously, of like, as we mentioned, horror and implied queerness in horror. Right when you enter my apartment, I have framed portraits of Frankenstein's monster and the Bride of Frankenstein, and I love Universal
Amazing.
monsters. So, no, that completely speaks to me. Am I shocked that this book from the 70s didn't go explicitly queer? No. But I also don't think it necessarily needs to. I think this presents enough to where, like, again, you have to pick up on it. I mean, it's very obviously there, especially when you get the formation of this family where it is two guys raising a young girl.
Mhm.
And obviously that dynamic shifts and changes due to the vampire of it all. Um, it presents so many situations and so much tenderness and texture to that relationship and complexity to that relationship. I mean, we're not to the movie yet, but I love how this weaves that relationship in time and time again, even when you get to the second half of the book in Paris.
Mhm.
It is one that, you know, that is romance as a relationship. That's not just like a friend. That's not just a practical, oh, he's the only other vampire we know. And granted, there's some of that, but like, clearly the emotional depth is deeper, but I also think it's worthwhile to have, you know, queer text like this. um you know, not to say like you shouldn't be able to be explicitly queer, but I think this is accessible to audiences at the time and readers at the time. And I think it's important in queer representation to have like baby steps, if you will, for
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
who are not necessarily wanting to read like graphic gay sex right away. Like, I think it's good to have baby steps like this. So I appreciate it. And again, as someone who is gay, like I find the representation in this obviously not to be like overly deep or overly explicit, but I find it to be worthwhile.
Yeah, it's like the classic it needed to walk before everything else could run kind of thing. I completely agree. And it's also clear that it's not a focus of the narrative per se, in a way that the two adaptations we're going to talk about kind of do put it as such. But the interesting tragedy behind the book of Interview with the Vampire is that actually the main focus is for Anne Rice when she was writing it was less on just the relationship between Louis with Lestat, but primarily the relationship that they have with Claudia, this young girl who was dying of due to the plague. She had lost a mother. Sorry, she had lost the entire family, and Louis, act of desperation, together with Lestat, decides to turn her into a vampire, a very, very young, a child vampire who is doomed to stay young forever. And what happened behind the scenes is that Anne Rice, she was, not having the best life. She was suffering from alcoholism. And in 1972, her daughter passed away due to leukemia. She was only 5 years old, and this image of a child so young having to die, the life being taken away from her, they really destroyed her. And writing Interview with the Vampire became almost a sort of therapy for her. And it's something I was not aware of. I want to say the first two times I even read the book, but then when I became more aware of it some 6, 7 years ago, it clicked, and it makes sense. Then rereading the book, it's like, oh, this is the true heart and soul. Everyone, Lestat and Louis, but especially Lestat, would go on to become an icon of the vampire genre of literature. There's like 11 or 12 books in this chronicles, and they intersect with other writings she's done. So it's really changed into something bigger than the origins. But in here, you can feel really how important it was for her to tell this story of Claudia as well. And it's so heartbreaking, and it's so sweet. Also, like you mentioned, just the idea of uh, a not so subtly implied, like gay parents couple. History's first gay vampire dad, which is fun, and I like that she has fun with it as well. It's not a book that takes itself
Yeah.
completely seriously most of the time. There are moments of humor, there are moments where she can relieve tension, but then she's also not afraid of showing the dark complexities of any relationship. So I don't know if
Yeah.
she even saw some of her own problems with addiction in it, the way they lash out at each other, the violence that they throw at each other as a couple, Louis and Lestat. In the book itself is still quite strong, which also makes all those, the implied queerness feel almost overt. It's less subtext and almost borderline text at that
Mm.
point, because the way they talk is the way couples would talk in the heat of arguments. I don't know if you have any thoughts about Claudia as a character.
Yeah, I mean, first I'll just say with this relationship, like addiction, domestic abuse. I mean, how many relationships, straight relationships, is it just like, oh, we're struggling, so we're gonna have a kid to fix our issues, and that's
Yes,
literally what they do
yes.
here. Like, it's such a unique, because like obviously queer relationships by nature are very unique, especially with kids and like planning
Mhm.
for kids, and like you're not gonna accidentally have a kid, or you can't just like randomly have a kid. In this situation, a gay couple is allowed just to like have that as the solution, which like you will never see anywhere else. But with Claudia, I also find it like there's a certain horror to the book specifically where she is so young. And we're gonna see it throughout this. Claudia, every version ages Claudia up a little bit. So if you watch
Mhm.
the show, she's like a teenager, about to be a teenager, kind of. I forget the exact age. In the movie, she is a
Like
little bit
16
older
or
than
something,
this.
yeah.
She's like probably 8 or 9 in the movie. Here, she's like really young, and it's just horrifying. And this is like the vampiric twist where it's like, yes, you have this girl, this very, very young girl, and there's drama there and blah, blah, blah. But then as her mind continues to age, the younger you make that character initially, the more horrifying and just like tragic it gets, where she's forever trapped to be this like 5-year-old girl, which is just like, it's insane. It
Mhm.
really is. It's tragic. I also, I mean, I assume this is like pretty spoiler okay, like if you haven't read the
Yes,
book or
full
know
on
the story.
spoilers, full on
um
spoilers.
her her death always gets me. Her death, and we'll, talk maybe one of my favorite scenes for one of the versions. But her execution is always like pretty horrifying and pretty tragic and pretty like, like throwing up. I do think it's interesting that towards the end, though, in that execution, especially here in the book version, Lestat doesn't like ever vouch for her. Lestat is like, you promised not to hurt Louis. But doesn't say that about Claudia, which I find interesting, for that like parental
Mhm.
figure to be willing to sacrifice her. I mean, obviously there's anger because she killed him. Fair enough. But I always find that a little bit interesting, where Louis like still is very heartbroken and very hurt by that, but Lestat is very like, yeah, yeah, this is what you deserve. Um,
Mhm.
it's an interesting, just again looking at this family dynamic, because it is a family dynamic. Um, little things you can read there and little kind of pickups you can have. But I think Claudia is a great character. I agree. I think like so much of it's obviously focused on the gay vampires. Tumblr loves that. But I think she always has such a tragic and compelling arc in each one of these versions.
Yeah, and everything that happens, I've always been moved by it. It's one of the first memories I have of reading the book, actually. It's just that image of the trial and execution, the way she writes it, it's I mean, we will get to how the other sources adapt it, but just the wordplay that she has, again, everything through Louis' perspective, is so brutal, and he is powerless to do anything to stop this, and he has to witness this. It's again horrifying, and that's always where the true horror came for me, because I wouldn't say this is conventionally horror in the sense of trying to scare you. But the biggest fear comes with this powerlessness, and the inability to stop mortality, the idea that even when they are immortal, they can still die and you can still do nothing about it.
Which ties into him and his brother at the beginning. And I mean, so much of this, obviously, with vampires is about controlling death or fighting death. And what do you do when someone who you know, who you love, wants to die or is going to die? What do you do when you want to die?
Hmm.
It all, I mean, there's poetry there, right? Like, this is, I think, probably a lot of people who haven't read this, maybe clouded by Twilight, which, not even to be a Twilight hater, but like, I think a lot of people would look at this and be like, oh, it's probably like pretty cheesy or pretty cheap. And it's like, no, there's like, and this is like gothic literature. This is horror literature, right? There's
Hmm.
poetry and there's these themes. And this is why horror, like at its, purest, at its best, is like one of the most beautiful genres out there. It's not always, I think horror over the last 2 decades, let's say, has just been so mutilated. And that's not even like, again, I love so many of those films and books and everything that you would say mutilates it. But like the horror genre initially was just like such a work of art with its
Yep.
poetry. And this is like, in some ways, it feels like one of the last big examples of that before we saw that real shift in the genre.
Yes, it
Certainly not the
feels.
last, to be clear, but one of them.
No, but especially on this scale, for sure. And it feels almost prescient, the way she treats the character of Daniel Malloy, the interviewer, who then you get to the end of the story, and it's like, okay, this vampire who's lived for the past 250, almost 300 years, opens his heart to you, shows you the horrors of the life he leads, the way that he's a slave to the blood. He cannot live a normal life. There's nothing glorious about it. It's horrifying. He has experienced so much loss and pain and suffering. And he's still like, this sounds amazing. Sign me up. This is sick, man. It's like, you don't get it. You don't get it. It feels like, yes, she knew, she was already probably seeing it in some ways in the zeitgeist of the time, but she probably knew that, yeah, people like to romanticize the vampire life. They like to glorify it in a way that, to be honest, she kind of does going forward. She capitalizes a decade later. It feels like one of those things of, yeah, this was successful, let's just bring it back, and then just run with it. But it does touch on how, yeah, commercialized it all was, and people can lose the true tragedy of it all. And it is a poignant ending. I love everything of afterwards, after what happened in Paris. Louis just completely lost meaning in life, but then manages to reconnect with Lestat in some ways, um, and just tries to continue leading life, even though it's become purposeless in a way, the way it would for someone like Anne Rice, who experiences such tremendous loss of someone at such a young age, not being able to move on until you find the meaning again. It's
Yep.
such a nice ending, um, subdued and reserved and
Mm.
intimate, instead of going for a grand climax of any kind.
Yeah. Do you know, is Daniel in any of the other books beyond this?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't think he appears in the second one.
Okay.
Um, but I know there's so many characters. Even we will get into the show, but I was reading up on it, and apparently there's like a character in the first season is someone that appears in book 11. So it's like, sure, okay, fine. I think it's the element of hindsight that can make
Mm.
something like that interesting. I think when
Yeah.
you have the entire Vampire Chronicles ready at your disposal. Um, but I do like how simple it is here. It's
Yeah.
like,
I mean, I don't ever read this or watch any of these and be like, I need the extended universe. Like, I don't know. I think this is a beautiful kind of, especially in the book. I think probably the book does the best job of any of the three of like just top to bottom. It's a very complete, kind of beautiful story.
Hmm.
I think we probably could have left it there. Though I will say, if I read all 36 main story books and like the 10 other extra
Oh
books
God.
of the Warrior Cats franchise, I think you can read the rest of Interview with a Vampire. That's my take, but I'll let you
Okay.
live your
I
life.
I want to get first to The Dark Tower by Stephen King. That's equally as daunting.
Fair.
I think Anne Rice's day will come. I think honestly it's likely we will talk about another Anne Rice novel in the coming future, as one Mr. Tom Ford is adapting it. Cry for Heaven.
Oh, is it?
It is
I
an Anne
like,
Rice book. It's an Anne
wow.
Rice
Wait,
novel.
okay, we do
I
actually gotta
just
lock
found
in.
out. We'll be back with some more Anne Rice conversations in the coming year, whenever that film comes out. I'm pumped. Tom Ford coming back, directing castrato singers in 18th century Italy. I'm excited.
Dude, it's not the point of this, so we can move on, but like, love Tom Ford. Tom Ford is so good. Like, oh God. Okay, I'm excited.
Tom Ford's Interview with the Vampire. I'd watch that. I'd watch that.
Starring Tom Cruise still.
I'd still watch that, to be honest. I'd still watch that. Before we move on to the movie, do you have a specific quote from the book that stood out to you that you would
I
like to read
do.
out, or a passage?
Let me scroll over. Okay. Quote, evil is always possible and goodness is eternally difficult. Beautiful. Poetry.
Nice.
Enough said.
Nice and simple. Nice and simple. I have another one also about evil. I think it's from the same sequence where he's discussing the nature of evil, where Louis says, evil is a point of view. We are immortal, and what we have before us are the rich feasts that conscience cannot appreciate and mortal man cannot know without regret. God kills, and so shall we. Indiscriminately, he takes the richest and the poorest, and so shall we. For no creatures under God are as we are, none so like him as ourselves. Dark angels, not confined to the stinking limits of hell, but wandering his earth and all its kingdoms. It feels almost um, like Milton, borderline like Milton writing. There's this element of turning the vampires into these angelic creatures of death, or demonic creatures, even you could say. Um, there's so many of those passages, and again, it plays into Louis being kind of an aristocrat figure. He's someone of a higher social status. He's a plantation owner, family owns a plantation. Um, but yeah, let's move on to the 1994 film by Neil Jordan. There's not much interesting backstory here outside of it's a movie that was bound to happen. The book was incredibly successful. She also started writing more books in the series by the time this actually went into development. There was big drama behind the scenes about the casting of Tom Cruise as Lestat. Anne Rice herself was against it when it was announced, but it was chosen. Even though she had written the screenplay, she was carefully involved in the making of this film. She did not have casting powers, so she criticized it. The fans criticized it, but in the end, she apologized because she recognized it was one of the best parts of the movie. On the flip side of that, one Mr. Brad Pitt, who was cast as Louis Dupont de Lac, um, at some point he was like, "I changed my mind. I don't want to make this movie." And the agent told him, "If you don't make this, that's almost $40 million in problems here." So he was like, "Okay, fine, I'll make it. It's too late to back down." And boy, oh boy, you can tell Carson. What was it like revisiting Interview with the Vampire by Neil Jordan?
If anyone listening has not engaged with these three pieces of media and you have any interest in watching the movie, please God watch it first. Because the first time I watched this, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
the story is great. The queerness, like, it has so much texture. And revisiting it, it's still good. Don't get me wrong. It still has the core foundations of that story. The visuals are great. Most of the performances are wonderful. But my God, does this not work really when you've seen the show, especially, but also read the book? It is kind of the nature of it as an adaptation as a film. It has to move so quickly through this story to get through all of the different things that happens. Yes, Brad Pitt is bad in it. He's not great. We got to admit. It's a very abridged version that doesn't have a lot of, I think, the soul and weight, and also just naturally being on screen, you don't get as much time inside their head. So a lot of those like beautiful thoughts that are expressed don't really shine through. It is what the adaptation could be. So I'm not mad at the film, and I still think it's good. But it just, when you've seen the other versions, it is clear in my opinion that this is the weakest of the three, just due
Mhm.
to the nature of kind of like what it has to be. But it's good. I mean, I still enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, it kind of pains me to say I like it less and less the more I watch it. So it's because I remember when you first watched it, I remember you were in love with it, rightfully so, to be honest. Because I remember even the first time I watched it years ago, not long after I've read the book for the first time, when I started getting more into horror cinema. I was like, okay, it's fun, it's gothic, they have all of those intricate sets building New Orleans, and then the Paris catacombs and the streets and the Théâtre de Vampire and everything. It's Neil Jordan knows how to put together those environments. He knows how to also ham it up. It's not a movie that's shy of being campy, of having heightened performances. Tom Cruise is having the time of his life in here. Kirsten Dunst as Claudia, honestly, maybe the standout of the movie. Every time I watch it, she has a maturity behind her eyes that it makes me so happy that she ended up becoming, the great actress that she is now. Because you have so many of those occasional. I don't have so many of those. Occasionally, you have great child actors that then just do not have a career, maybe because they don't want to, or the Hollywood system chews them up and spits them out. But she was so talented, and I'm still in awe of her in this film. To stand up to someone like Tom Cruise, who's hamming it up and chewing the scenery and having fun with it, and it works. It works. That's who Lestat is supposed to be. He's someone who's an attention seeker. He wants everyone's eyes to always be on him, and mm, it's so exciting. But then you have Brad Pitt, and so it's maybe for me the worst performance Brad Pitt has ever given. Uh, Clearly so zoned out, so disinterested, to the point that it's a shame they could not recast him. It was too late to go back for him to change his mind. Because honestly, I don't think he would have been the best choice. But you have in the cast already Christian Slater, who plays Daniel Malloy as the interviewer, who is such a great actor, and he brings a good energy to the role, even in the little part that he's in. A role that originally was supposed to go to River Phoenix, who had just passed away, and they honor him in the end credits as well. He gets a dedication. Um, yeah, such a weird film. It's like very messy, and you're spot on with it. The main problem rewatching it is that it is very abridged. Uh, it doesn't feel without focus. I wouldn't say it's a movie without focus, but kind of. Watching it, it's a problem that I've often found in lesser adaptations. In terms of writing, dare I say, primarily, is that they feel like the team is trying primarily to hit the beats. And so here it moves so quickly to the point that you also have to cut out so many important elements to the character. So Louis is milk toast in here. He has no characteristics. Movie opens up and it's like, I lost everyone. I was depressed. I just wanted to die. Lestat made me a vampire. Moving on. just, just kind of like skipping everything, spending so little time. The plantation element again. Um, they try to give some agency is not the right term, but they try to be respectful in the portrayal. Period accurate in some ways. You see how they're afraid of them. They're doing the dances. It's fine. Sandewa Newton is also there. It's always like a surprise for me. Mission Impossible 2 before it was a reunion of Interview with the Vampire. Um, but yeah, I think it's a fun film. It's definitely a fun film, but it loses a lot in the adaptation process. I don't know if there's something that particularly bothers you in terms of
Yeah.
changes here.
I would say the biggest thing is the removal of so much of Lestat in Paris.
Hmm.
In the book,
All of it,
Lestat is a
basically.
very, I mean, yeah, I mean, literally pretty much all of it. Lestat in the book is a very active part of what happens in Paris. He gets some beautiful characterization, especially that relationship with Louise really pushed in that moment. It really, like, you finally get to see kind of some of Lestat's cards there. And this, he's removed, which is like such the big point. I almost feel like with this, what I would have done is just like remove the Paris bit, to be honest. I would like just have this basically be season one of the show. I think like if
Yeah.
you have to chunk it up, then you would at least have more time to kind of do it right. But I just think that's such a waste once you get there.
Yeah, but that's when you get into like the hitting the beats. It's like you need to get to Paris because you need Claudia to die because they killed another vampire and Armand is listening in. Side note, insane hair game from Antonio Banderas in here. I think everyone is just super long hair and they play into this element that like, when you become a vampire, you cannot change your hairstyle. It automatically makes it super pretty and coiffed up. It gives you a permanent, nice perm that you cannot remove forever and ever for the rest of your life. And since all of those men were born in periods where they would normally naturally have long hair, they keep having those long luscious hair. And Antonio Banderas, especially of the entire cast, it's so funny. Just like whenever he comes up, just this black hair is whooshing around. um that tension between him and Brad Pitt, again, it's that queer subtext that they almost don't hide in the films. It feels almost like a contractual thing, where probably it wasn't, but it's so funny to speculate because by the time they are supposed to be gay in the books, already from the second one it becomes explicitly queer, the relationship between Louis and Lestat and also Armand in the past. But in here it feels like they know fans are aware of this, so they play around with it a lot. They have a lot of innuendos and their faces get always so close where you're just wishing they would just give each other a little smooch. But they never do. It's part of the fun of watching like a movie made in the 90s with big stars who would never agree to kissing on screen. Don't know.
I mean, I'm not gonna say that's why Brad Pitt wanted out, but who
Well,
knows?
well, 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 maybe.
He thought he was just signing on for a vampire little thing. He didn't know until he got on set some of the layers.
It was like the vibes are too strong here. The pool. Antonio Banderas' mark is too close to my own here. I'm uncomfortable.
He started to feel
Honest,
some things, yeah.
wish that were me, honestly, to be that close. 1994 peak Banderas. Oof, oof. But yeah, I will say that the one part that does work for me a lot in the film, again, everything that revolves around Claudia, and especially the demise, not so much the element of the woman. I don't even remember if they give her a name, Madeline, the one that she falls in love with, that she wants to have as her own partner of sorts to continue going through life with. In the film, it's literally introduced 2 minutes later. She's dead. Doesn't mean we need to have her in half an hour of the movie, but it's so barely characterized. It's just literally there for the sake of having her. You need to have someone else there with her. We need to have this character, but it's so rushed. But it still works. It feels nightmarish. The music by Goldenthal is blasting, and the camera work is going crazy. Louis is getting buried alive, and she and this other woman get thrown into this well where they're sealed up, just waiting for the sun to cook them up. It's horrifying. It's really horrifying, and I think the performance really sells it. The screaming and the hiding. I remember when I first watched it, it was the scene that like shocked me, similarly to the book in a way. I think that's where you also see Neil Jordan's style, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and if you don't know what's coming, I mean, they draw it out so much that just kind of naturally knowing how media tends to operate, you're like, okay,
Hmm.
something's gonna happen because you see like they're in the last bit of shadow in the cellar and the sun is like creeping towards them, and you're so prepared for something to happen to stop what's about to go down, right?
Hmm.
And then even when they finally cook, and even when they go to the bodies, which still is an effect that looks really good, um, Madeline has like like covered Claudia in a way, and it holds on that shot just long enough where you're like, okay, Claudia is definitely gonna like jump scare and like just kill these people, and then it just doesn't, and they just kind of fade away and like break down. It's heartbreak. It is really like a standout scene. Absolutely, I definitely
Yeah.
noted to talk about that. It's really well done. I mean, the entire film technically is not an issue. The directing is great. I love the production design in this. Bring me back to
So
the
nice.
90s where everything had to be practical because it's just like they're real sets, they're real costumes, all the effects look pretty good. Like it really does still. If you're looking for like gothic visuals and a visualization of this world, it absolutely delivers. I imagine someone like Del Toro really likes this movie in that way.
Yeah. And it makes me miss. It was something I noticed rewatching it now on like a nice TV, the nice Blu-ray. You can just see there's some of the white shots in New Orleans where you just see the painted backdrop of the city, and the artifice fits. It is also something that you should not take overtly seriously in terms of, like you're not gonna think it's all real, it's all fake, it's all fiction story, but it brings it almost to this dark fairy tale vibe of a cautionary tale of sorts. Again, you have this element of Malloy not getting the story at the end. Um, but yeah, and there are some moments of grace. I think another scene that I always like, that feels very much like a special thing of the movie, is that since it is a visual medium, you also get to that sequence where the time passes on. Louis is unable to move on from the death of Claudia, but after getting his revenge in Paris and going back to the States, um, cinema becomes almost a medium of escapism for him, which is such a beautiful element. Wish it was explored more, but also you cannot really do much with it, considering also that the movie's over. Kind of, it's like you had the big action climax, decapitations, and people burning. Also, so much fire. Watching it in a 2-hour movie, it feels almost comedic. That every time it's like, plantation, we're burning it down. The nice house in New Orleans with Lestat, we're burning it down. The Paris Coven, we're burning it down. Solution to all your life's problems: just burn those bridges, Carson. That's like the theme of the film. Burn everything down, restart your life. It's never too late. But I do love that element of the cinema being this visual, like how do you even call it, there's the scene also later with Lestat, who's hiding away from the helicopter crying, and it's like it's like a fake light, artificial light. He uses a specific term for it, Louis, that I like. It's like the idea that through the cinema he can relive the colors of life and the beauty of being a real person. And it's something I find quite touching, that is less prevalent in the first book. Yeah, I don't know if you had something to say about all of this.
No, I mean, I would typically agree. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting film as an adaptation, certainly. Like, one thing I'll just add kind of randomly, I don't love the ending to this. I think this is probably the weakest, not that he's bad, I think it's the weakest Daniel that we get. And then how they work in Lestat at the end feels very like awkward to me. It just feels like probably the one that has the weakest, like it feels like it really goes into like a movie mode, for example. Like it just, I don't
Hmm.
know. I don't know if it flows for me. But yeah, I appreciate a bit about cinema. Like it's just such a weird, like again, I don't hate the film because I think it's just trying to make it work. But that's probably the biggest, one of the other biggest flops for me is the ending, certainly.
Yeah, I don't want to be. I was trying to be aware of it during this watch. Do they even ever say his name of
I
Daniel
don't
Malloy? I don't think they
believe
ever
so.
do.
But that's like a thing in the book. It takes so long to reveal his name in the book
Hmm.
also, like, which I don't like. I don't know if I'm dumb or something. I don't get why it's such a big deal, but I guess.
I don't know if it's supposed to be almost like an audience avatar kind of thing, where
Yeah.
like you as an audience member going, it's like, vampires are cool. I wish I could live forever and fly around and kill people with no repercussions. And then the entire story is like, don't be like that, please don't be like that. But I
I
love
mean,
how cheesy the
yeah.
ending goes. Like you say, like going into movie mode, right? It's like
Yeah.
Lestat is in the car. He puts on the Guns N' Roses cover of
Oh my
"Sympathy for the
god.
Devil"
On the Golden Gate
on
Bridge,
the
like not even
Golden
just
Gate
like
Bridge.
it's so crazy. And I will
Cut to
say, if
credits
you
fading
knowing
in.
the story now, I forgot that was the ending. So I will say that like it had a certain energy to it where I was like, this is like kind of baller, but it's very weird. It's very weird.
I mean, it's
Alas.
also because when they made it, I think the full title is something like "Interview with the Vampire: The Vampire Chronicles," and they were going to turn it into a franchise.
Oh
That
my
was the
gosh.
idea because he already had, I think, 5 books by that time, or something like that.
Wait, why didn't they though?
I think because just the actors didn't really want to do it. I think Tom Cruise was
Oh
down, but
yeah.
just it never really materialized into something until they
Yeah.
made Queen of the Damned, which is technically the actual sequel. Like, if you want, you get the continuation of the story in Queen of the Damned, but I don't think there's even a single crew member that came back. They changed everything and everyone. Um, and it is an adaptation of both the Vampire Lestat book and the Queen of the Damned book.
Have you seen it?
I have seen it. I
Haven't.
mean, it's super campy, cheesy, early 2000s horror. But the whole idea is that, like, minor premise spoilers for the Vampire Lestat, but the whole idea is that Lestat wakes up after having buried himself in the ground. It's the 80s, and he goes to the store, and there's like Interview with the Vampire book by Daniel Molloy, and he picks it up and he's like, all of this is bullshit. I'm gonna tell you my story. I'm gonna write my own book about this. And then he also finds a rock band near where he hides out, and he takes them over and decides, I'm gonna tell everything about the vampires through music. I don't care. And he makes all the vampires in the world angry with it, and they try to kill him. That's kind of the
Huh.
idea of the Vampire Lestat. So it goes in a
Um
completely different, like it's very much a counterpoint to having the book be from 76 and
yeah.
then the book to be, I think it's actually like a decade later or something like that, 84, 86, when she
That's
released
super
it. So
fun.
yeah, but again, where's the tragedy and the drama? It's like, no, we're just going on this crazy adventure with Lestat. We love him. We love a
Because also
nice,
that's the energy Lestat has always brought, of course, is
yeah,
like energy rock star, totally. I see that they've like entered random, like trying to adapt it from books, but nothing really panned out. Thank God in 2016 they were going to make a remake of the film starring Jared Leto as Lestat. Thank God, did not happen.
we got Morbius instead.
Well, and well, we don't need to talk about that.
What would you say then is your favorite scene from the film, if you had to pick one?
Yeah, you stole it from me. We already talked about the death of Claudia and Madeline. It's
Mm.
such a good scene. It's so impactful. I think it's so well designed. Like taking the scene that, as you mentioned in the book, is already so impactful, but then using cinema and especially timing and pacing and editing of cinema to like rework it in a way that just elevates it even. I love it. I think
Mhm.
it's genuinely a fantastic scene. But there are some great moments of chemistry between these actors and some of their like more intimate moments, while again not explicitly overly queer. I would say this is the least queer version out of all of them. Still definitely queer. There's still some great moments there though. So I guess I'd throw that out. But certainly that death is impactful.
Totally. I have two other moments as well that I really love from this film. I mean, there's like this montage of Claudia becoming more of a killer. That's very fun, where she's like getting into this shop and she wants a doll and she just kills the owner and gets the doll. She's learning to play the piano and she kills the teacher and the stud like scolds her. And it's like, ah, move aside, just like pushes the corpse down to the side. There's a lot of nice little touches there. But I do really love, it was a scene that also has always impacted me in a way. It's when Lestat and Louis get their own shared apartment situation and invites over to Women of the Night. He kills one and then he's playing around with the other and he's trying to convince Louis to kill her. And there is something very sadistic about it that I think Tom Cruise really pulls off. I am excited about Digger because I think we've not seen Tom Cruise bring this edge in a long time. And I think here you see how he can be villainous. He can have also this anti-hero appeal to him because he can have a scene as sadistic as this one where he plays around with a woman as if she's just a food that you play with on the plate. It's a hunter playing with the prey, essentially, um, and make it work. Again, I think I don't even know who at the time could have pulled off the role of Louis successfully alongside Tom Cruise. Is something I've thought about almost every time I watch it because I always biggest takeaway is always Brad Pitt is so bad. Who could have acted alongside Tom Cruise in this case? I don't even know if you have any fan casting or someone you would have liked because I'm thinking like people that were starting to be hot at the time, not Keanu Reeves. We've seen Bram Stoker's Dracula. I
Yeah,
love him so
probably not.
much, but not the best actor for this role. Honestly, I have no idea. Brad Pitt kind of makes sense, but it brings no energy to it, no passion. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I think in position he makes sense. I don't know if in performance he ultimately delivers.
Mm.
I don't know. Like, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, right? Like, because you really have to have a guy who has like this both sides to him of being like vulnerable and being
John Travolta.
emotional. Well, hold on. I mean, what's Nicolas Cage up to?
True, true. But Nicolas Cage, I can see more as Lestat in that case. If we had to pick, I think he can bring
No.
that crazed energy for
I
sure.
would like to see it, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. There's plenty of like, I don't know. I'm sure if you look through like the cast of The Outsiders or maybe like a Phoenix, I don't know. Like, there's someone out there. I'm sure.
Matt Dillon,
Yeah,
maybe, maybe. No,
sure.
better. If you wanted to, you would be more committed. Could
What
be
was he doing
better.
at the time? He was, yeah, he was definitely free at the time. So
His schedule was free. He could have just popped up on set, 6 months shooting Interview with the Vampire or something. Um, I'm also impressed by how they managed to keep Kirsten Dunst so young during
yeah,
filming. Like, because those movies take a long time to make. I remember this was a problem with the Terminator 2, for instance, that the kid in that one was like growing way too quickly during production, and they had to redub all of his lines because the voice was dropping and whatnot. Fun, 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 fun.
no, and you're right. She's great in this. She's the best Claudia, in my opinion. This is definitely like she is phenomenal, and it has like this is the nice balance, and we'll talk obviously here in a minute, where like it is a little bit more aged up to where I
Hmm.
just think with a child actor, you obviously have to age up a bit more from being as young as she is in the book, but she still maintains that tragedy of being really young, which obviously the show kind of abandons. So no, I really love this Claudia.
Yeah, let's go into the show. I'm very very excited to get to it now. A show that's kind of is the saving grace for AMC at the moment because ever since The Walking Dead, the main season died off, they have had a ton of spin offs, but no real success from them. I know people watch them, but again, just the metrics alone are not enough for studios. Everyone wanted a new Game of Thrones, everyone wanted a new whatever to be successful. And somehow the big surprise for them was Interview with the Vampire, released in 2022. It was made in 2 seasons. The second one came out in 24. That created by Roland James, who's a big fan of the entire Vampire Chronicles. He actually talked with Anne Rice before she passed away that they were making the show. She gave them the blessings. The entire estate is behind it and supporting it, and they're kind of creating this shared universe of shows. There is the Mayfair Witches spin-off show, like side show. There is a show entirely about the Talamasca agency, this shadowy organization that's controlling everything in secret behind the scenes. Um, Apparently, both shows are not good. From what I've read, I have zero time and energy to commit to watching shows that people don't like. I can barely watch the shows people do love. So, but I was very excited about this Interview with the Vampire show to come out. I watched it pretty much all as it was coming out, both the first season and the second one, and I love it. There's so much to talk about here with this one. I'm very curious, Carson, what was it like for you to watch this show?
Okay, I'm happy we're doing this because last time I was on the show recently for the Odyssey, I was talking about how I was disappointed with that as an adaptation, but I was trying to make it clear like I think it's missing the point of the book. I don't think it's
Mhm.
that it's not just like an exact adaptation. I don't mind if you change things. And this is like a perfect example of the opposite because this show
Let's go.
absolutely rules. And as an adaptation, dare I say, it's one of the best adaptations I've ever seen in my life. Um, it's incredible. I mean, I don't think the show is
I'm so
flawless,
happy.
but as an adaptation, it takes that original story and it's bold. It's not afraid to change things, to get into things. Obviously, you have a switch of race of the main character, and it fully commits to addressing this and using that perspective, which just enriches the whole thing. 2 seasons, very, very clean. I mean, we'll get into it with all the certain details, but as far as opening thoughts, like, I am so happy you got me to watch the show. I will be watching the rest of the seasons. Will not probably be watching the spin-offs, I have to be honest, but no, I love this, and I do think if you're going to engage with Interview with a Vampire, you should watch the show. This is not to give away the cards early, but this is, in my opinion, the best adaptation
Hmm.
of this story, including the original book. I love the show.
I agree. I think it's truly rare to find an adaptation that elevates the source material to this extent. Um, I think the book will always stay special for many reasons, personal, but also culturally, it will always stay relevant. But there is something done here that works on so many levels. Um, a first level for me, the one that I found the most intriguing going into it was a meta level because it's not supposed to be like, oh, it's Interview with the Vampire, but it's a sequel of sorts to Interview with the Vampire where it's 2021, 2022 itself. It's like during the pandemic. Daniel Molloy is like over 60 years old at this point. He had this experience with Louis in the 70s. I think it's also it's like 76 itself, the year when the book came out. So there's this element as well that's very nice. And he's been haunted by this experience. And then he gets contacted again by Louis, who wants to give him the interview again. And this time he wants to be truthful and set things right. And you don't know what really happened back then in this universe. So there is this element of feeling almost like a legacy sequel of sorts. It has that vibe, but then they also make one of the biggest changes of all, outside of changing the time period where they move the story up a bit forward to the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. It's right before, right around the First World War. But you get to have Louis Dupont du Lac as a black man. Um, Jacob Anderson, who plays him. We've all seen him before in Game of Thrones, but here is fantastic. Like you go from Brad Pitt, from Brad Pitt in the film to him here, and it's night and day. He is absolutely outstanding, and here we get what we were talking about earlier, right? We were criticizing how shallow and banal in some ways the portrayal of plantation times is. Anne Rice wants you to sympathize with a slave owner essentially in a way that she skims over it just to not get into the nitty-gritty details of it all. But here in the show they fully embrace the racial element and the social element, and by twisting it to have it be a black man who, because of necessity of the time and to maintain some sort of status quo, the only way that he can survive is by being a pimp. I don't know if there is like a nicer way of, of saying that word. I'm not aware. Maybe you, Carson, can help. But again, he's a pimp, through and through. Um, and it adds a very interesting dynamic as well in the relationship that he has with Lestat, played by Sam Reed, who was probably the revelation from this show. I know thirst traps around Sam Reed are plentiful. I know some people that are absolutely obsessed with him. He's incredibly charismatic. He brings the presence, it brings the sensuality, the humor, the darkness, the charisma, the accent. It's one of the best, honestly, one of the best French accents I've ever heard in a show. To the point that if you told me he was actually French, I would believe you. Even when he speaks the language, it's so convincing. And yeah, I think I'm curious to hear some of the more negative thoughts you have because you said it's not perfect. I can say from my point perspective is that it's definitely a TV show from AMC, and AMC doesn't have the HBO money. And the first season, rewatching it, you can feel the first season vibe to it, where it's like, okay, we have the very nice apartment in Dubai for Louis and Daniel. I love Eric Bogosian here as well, how they expand the character. Um, but I do love also that. You get this New Orleans that's changing and evolving, and it grows into something a bit more, I don't know, cheap for like made for television thing. I don't get it, but I don't know how you feel about that.
Sorry, I was battling a
What happened?
spider, and I do have
Oh God,
arachnophobia. So,
I'm
no.
sorry.
As far as my complaints, this is really, I mean, and I agree. There's some elements where you can feel the budget. Certainly, there's some elements that
In the
don't.
first season, I
In
would
the first
clarify.
season, especially, yeah. Mostly it comes in just the format as a TV show. I think especially this story, and I like breaking it up how they do between the seasons. But if you're watching this as a TV show, especially in season one, there's not necessarily like your traditional arc for a show to have where
Hmm.
beginning of the season, middle of the season, end of the season. And granted, you have an ending moment and there's a big moment, the final episode is big and everything. But if you're just watching it straight through, it does feel a little bit like, wait, we only have like 2 episodes left. Like it's kind of just been building these relationships and building these stories. Like it doesn't feel narratively, this is not, it's a show, it's a story that is not built to be a TV show. So I think the biggest thing is just some of the narrative pacing. The second season also for me is just a little bit weaker than the first. I mean, I love the relationship with Lestat. I think they do a lot of great stuff in there. So I
Interesting.
do like the world of Paris that we explore. The additional adding of race and explicit sexuality, it adds so much to this. I mean, especially that second season, you get a lot of conversation about we're going to Europe and we're going to Paris, and it's nice to be freed of the racism that plagued America. Not that Europe didn't have
Hmm.
racism, and they talk about that, but like,
Yep.
it adds so much texture and adds so many layers to like that desire and that emotion. But for me, it just would be some of those pacing choices, but almost every choice they add. Or every choice they make with every single character with how they adapt it just adds so much. Being explicitly queer, that theme of isolation that you get as being a vampire, both due to race and sexuality, is much stronger. Great portrayal of Daniel. Adding during COVID, he has
Superb.
health issues and is dying. He's aging in general. Eric Bogosian, I don't know how you pronounce that
Bogosian
last
or
name.
something like
Sure,
that. Yeah.
phenomenal. Like this guy,
Yep.
maybe best performance in the entire show for me, which is crazy to say for Daniel, but like it really is. If we do not get if we do not get an Anthony Bourdain movie with him playing Anthony Bourdain,
Oh God,
something's gone
yes.
so wrong. We're in the worst timeline if that does not happen because it's so obvious. And we were initially at one point we're going to do an Anthony Bourdain episode of this show,
Hmm.
which I would support us doing eventually.
There's a new
But
movie coming out.
Tony too though needs to be this guy because I think Tony's when he's younger, but he's phenomenal here. There's also some great texture with him. They meet initially back in the 70s in this gay bar where they have this first interview. That
Hmm.
first interview, also just the presence of that is really interesting. That's one of the things that like if you just talk about like nitpicking. In the
Go
second
for it.
season, a lot of focus goes towards this new guy who comes into the picture. I do like that there's some of like a unreliable narrator here where memories and stuff just due to age and due to various factors can get a little twisted. I think some of that was like, okay, it's a little bit heavy-handed here in some segments. Like these are really, nitpicks as far as
Mm.
narrative. Almost every choice just like works tremendously. So I hope that answered your question. I don't remember what the
Yeah,
question
yeah, yeah. No,
was,
no, no,
but
totally,
yeah.
totally. I do love that element of subjectivity, honestly, in here because the way Louis, like, yeah, of course, you have Malloy who has his own memories of the interview and he gets a hold of the tapes and he can re-listen to them and re-experience what was being said. But also Louis himself has this doubts put into his mind of what really happened. Does he actually remember it? He's contradicting himself occasionally. He's sugarcoating some elements too, where he's almost more loving and defensive of Lestat in a way that he wasn't 40 years earlier, 50 years earlier. So it's so densely packed with those themes and it explores them to the fullest. I think it's one of those rare cases where I really don't feel they could have done more. It's like, yeah, they did everything they could with all of this. And the episodes sometimes they manage to also, I think it's like every season 7 to 8 episodes or something like that, right? So it doesn't overstay its welcome. They do manage to spice things up. You have, for instance, in the first season, one episode, Malloy reads the diary of Claudia, so you get this change in perspective and change in narrator. I do really I understand why they made an older Claudia, because if you're going to make a TV show, you need someone that can look older and not age out of the role. And also it's kind of interesting that they do go for a lot of the darker themes here, especially when they portray violence and abuse, domestic abuse. It's hard. It's really, really hard. The yelling, the emotional violence they have with each other is really upsetting to the point that they have um, content warnings and trigger warnings at the beginning of some of the episodes, something that the actors themselves push to have. And they received a strong reaction when those episodes came out, rightfully so. Um, but I do like that they make Claudia a little bit older while still maintaining that element of her having to always be young and never really growing older. I think both actresses do a really good job. I will say I really warmed up to Delaney Hales, who plays her in the second season, because the first time going from the first season, I think Bailey Bass was also really good. And it feels weird because there is such a strong change in character in the second season just by the nature of the plot. Also in the book, it happens where Claudia becomes more closed off and she's more upset and lashes out at Louis more often when they're in Paris. But yeah, it takes a while to get used to it. I feel. I feel like.
I mean, I think her material is much stronger in the second season in
Yeah.
general. You get the stuff with the play and stuff, and her really, dealing with now that the kind of harsh emotions, like the high emotions of this initial situation wore off, you really get into that tragedy. Where in the first season, it's a lot more brash. It's a lot more anger at Lestat just immediately for causing this. I do think it kind of rushes the whole like we gotta kill him. That's the only option.
Mhm.
But I mean, I do think it works overall. But I do agree in the second season, I think her overall presence is stronger. There's also so much in the beginning here with Lestat really grooming Louis to want him to be a vampire.
Yeah.
Really explicit. I mean, if you're not prepared for it or you're not expecting it, some shocking moment. I mean, there's a scene where Louis in a church pew and is confessing his sins, and Lestat just comes and wrecks house, and I think it's an amazing scene. And I think that whole beginning part of him, just like
The
torturing this
pilot
guy,
gets you.
really. Yeah, no, I think it's one of the best scenes of the show, and maybe I'll mention it in a little bit, but like, it's such a interesting take on that relationship. Not that it wasn't there in the previous ones, but this or at previous adaptations, but this is like really explicitly this is unhealthy. There is that connection, there is that
Mhm.
relationship, and you explore it more, and you have the vampire side of it where like if you only, especially in the second season when they're looking for other vampires, and Louis really has to internalize like, hey, maybe he was the only one who can tell us about us and guide us and be there for us as vampires. So there's like layers to it. That's kind of the beauty of using vampires. It allows for this kind of like push in narrative and push in character.
Mhm.
But it really villainizes Lestat in a way that he's still like charming. He's still, everything. but I like that they're more heavy-handed on that. I like that this is a heavy-handed adaptation. I mean, how many adaptations do we look at now, that are, like, weak, or they're afraid to make bold swings, or
The
they're afraid
Odyssey.
with a character or that is iconic, like Lestat, and I do think Lestat is iconic.
Yeah.
How many are just terrified to, like, this is maybe a weird, comparison, but they just announced they're remaking, A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I was like, there's
Mm.
no way you're gonna take a character that iconic with merch and like go into like the darkness that was originally there for that character. There's just no way now that you would ever be bold enough to do it. It feels like this show is bold enough to make those swings. It's bold enough to add these elements. Again, as an adaptation, like it really is. I think it demands your respect. This is like what a dream adaptation I feel like is.
Totally, totally. And all the expansions work. I think honestly for me, I think the first season was great. For me, the second season is probably one of the best seasons of TV I've seen. I really love that second season. Also because of what you mentioned, like everything that has to do with the Theatre de Vampire. You mentioned Eric Bogosian being your favorite performer actor in the show. I swear to you, I don't think I've seen him in anything else but Ben Daniels playing Santiago, like the evil vampire who's trying to take over the Théâtre de Vampire from Armand. I think he is spectacular. The screen presence he has, trying playing this diva who wants to own everything, and the way he commands the stage, I love him. Whenever he's on screen, I really love him. I think he's my standout performance from the second season. Um, but even the way they develop Armand in a way that originally the casting, I keep forgetting the um, actor's name. One second. He's played Assad Zaman. Assad Zaman also it's very different from Antonio Banderas in terms of look, in terms of presence, but he works because Armand is this more insidious character that they go for the darkness with him. They actually get to the trial in the theatre, something that you do not get in the film, that you also mentioned is key to the book, the fact that Lestat does come back in the narrative. And even here they managed to have him pop up as this delusional visions of Louis who cannot let go, which fits with the grooming that you were mentioning as well. You know, you've spent so many decades with this person who's been manipulating you and controlling you and changing your life for the worse in many ways, not for the better. Um, even the oh my god, we didn't even talk about the brother in the show of Louis, but the entire opening episode where you get the brother who has mental problems and is very devoted to Catholicism. There's this element of faith as well that is always been key to vampire lore, and here they face it head on again in a way that even the book doesn't really get to do. And I do wonder if some of those elements are due to having access to the entire Vampire Chronicles. Maybe some of those parts are taken from future books. I have no idea of knowing. But I think just looking primarily at the first book, it does expand in all the right ways here. Yeah.
No, I mean absolutely.
Do you have any favorite scene from this show then that you would like to particularly highlight?
I mean, there's a lot of good scenes. I love the opening I already mentioned as far as Lestat just terrorizing him. I mean, just especially the church pew when you think you have this moment of calm and it explodes. I think that's
Church on
great. But I do have a
Fire.
couple others. Everything in the Paris theater, you kind of mentioned it, it's incredible. The production design is great, but like the shows and stuff, it's so fun. It's such a good set. But also the ending of season one, the Mardi Gras ball, where the drama finally happens. They're gonna kill Lestat, and you get the moment where there's like three different twists in like two scenes, like back to back scenes, where the situation just keeps evolving, and you don't know how it's going to go because the adaptation's also been so different that even if you're
Mhm.
familiar with the story, it doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, I know exactly where this is going. Very, very worthwhile there.
Yes, yes. I think that's something we both criticized about the Odyssey when we talked about it very recently. That like you're just waiting for the beats to happen. And in here, you kind of almost forget, to be honest. You almost forget, even when you get to that trial at the end, where you know how it's all going to end. You know that Claudia is doomed, Madeline is doomed, but the way they get to it, there is so much rage, pent up frustration and aggression. There is a moment for me, honestly, if I had to pick like scenes, there's so many scenes, but if I had to pick one episode for me, that's the episode. The entire trial episode is spectacular. The way Lestat keeps going off script because the Santiago and the team gave him a script to follow. Essentially, he keeps breaking up from it and going his own way with the story. There's the moment where you have one of the audience members who makes like a queer remark, queer slur, and he just destroys him basically in public. It's so powerful again, and it's also not. I appreciate that it's not putting a lens on being like, "Hey, queer story, gays, they are amazing and they can exist in this world." Just like with the racians, it's just like, yeah, it's more accepted in some ways than and in some places than others, but we're still recognizing that it wasn't all perfect in the same way that it isn't now. There is something interesting there as well of modernizing the plot, modernizing the characters, but still showcasing how some issues are just universal, but also how much better we've gotten in some ways in just life and living. I think it's a tremendous show. It's truly a tremendous show. You have not yet seen the third season, even though technically it's become its own show, The Vampire Lestat, since they have this entire universe of the Vampire Chronicles that they are expanding upon with AMC. They can't afford to say, yeah, this is not season three. It's just its own show. It has a completely different style. It has a completely different energy that works in its own right. Um, but I think there is something really special about those two seasons that I think can also work as standalones. Because honestly, the first season you need to continue because you get to the end. Oh my god, this man is Armand, and it's like, what? That's the ending? That's where you're stopping the plot? Okay, I'm gonna wait for season two. Like, I genuinely felt when I first watched it, like I need this second season now. Like I want to watch it tomorrow. Please give it to me. So that anticipation really worked in the way that I had in those 2 years. But then you get to the continuation and everything that's going to happen afterwards, I don't think you really need it. And I like the ending of the second season. I like the reunion with Lestat. I like how they turn Malloy into a vampire. He publishes the book, and then people want to get Louis. It's unfortunate that they don't really follow through on this in the first season. Not a spoiler, but just don't expect the John Wick Vampire Edition against Louis. It goes in some weird directions for sure, but yeah, I think it's great. I genuinely think it's great and a worthy adaptation of Anne Rice's legacy. I know you already mentioned it, Carson, that the show is your preferred version of this. So you have then some final words to bring us towards closure of this episode after discussing all those
I mean, it's
adaptations.
rare to have a story, and you know, I think this speaks to Anne Rice's work that there's three versions of the story we've discussed in three different
Mhm,
formats, and I would not say there was a bad version between any of them. I think they all
mhm,
have their own highlights. I think they're all worth seeing and worth experiencing. You know, the book and the show are just admittedly very different. So even though I do think the show is the most well realized and like the perfectly formed experience out of the three, I would
mhm,
still definitely recommend the book. And you know, I still would say, especially if maybe you want to, you know, you haven't read the book or you haven't watched the show and you just kind of want to get a temperature check on the vibes of this, I would also recommend the movie. I think it speaks to the story, speaks to all the talent involved in all
mhm.
three versions. I think this is like the strongest episode of Anatomy of an Adaptation I would say we've done. I mean, it's very rare to find this. And again, ending with, in my opinion, genuinely one of the best adaptations I can think of. You know, you cannot go wrong. So shout out Interview with the Vampire.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think this is a gem, a gem of a story that changed vampire literature forever. You would not have those Vampire Diaries True Blood stories without Interview with the Vampire coming out in the 70s. Um, you would not have, I also believe, this resurgence in queerness in horror literature that would also then bleed into queerness in film without um, turning these monsters into something beautiful, something that's someone that can be a protagonist, an anti-hero of sorts. You need this because otherwise you will continue to have, similar to Frankenstein's monster, in a way, Frankenstein's creature, where you need to have some of those stories that see the humanity behind the creature. It cannot just be you have a monster for thrills. And no, there is something actually that can touch upon our humanity, something that, of course, Mary Shelley very fully realized with Frankenstein, and Anne Rice herself also fully realized here with the vampire as this mythical creature. Um, and the show really hits on it. I think the movie works as this also time capsule of 90s cinema because of the cast, because of the production value. It's still at the time where you don't have prevalent CGI, so a lot of the effects are in camera. Some of the flying and the vampire effects look um, goofy in an endearing way. I love that you can tell everyone's on wires and just flailing their arms around. But I also love that they genuinely set people on fire. You have those stuntmen in the catacombs, especially at the end. That is a tremendous, tremendous climax and highlight. I also love though how they pull it off in the show. I think the show's climax and the vengeance against the vampires is even more satisfying because the punishment is even more brutal in the way that they carry it out. Um, so I think even the horror element in the show works spectacularly well, and translating this all into for the second season post World War France, where you also have the element of Nazism, and with Madeline finally becomes a real character, someone who's kind of put to the wayside in everything. I think the actress is fantastic in the show, great chemistry with Delaney Hales, and yeah, for me it's I completely agree with you. I think this is one of the strongest examples we've ever seen of an adaptation elevating the material, doing something more with it, doing something that fits also our modern times, where we are more racially aware, racially conscious, conscious about gender, about sexuality, where even implications of sexual assault that are kind of prevalent in present in the book and tangentially touched upon in the film in a way that feels not exploitative, but kind of like yeah, it's kind of like rape, but whatever. In the show, they face it head on. Everything that happens with Claudia in the first season, it's horrifying and brutal, and you hear it from her own voice and her own words. I like that the show also has female voices, both in terms of writers and some of the directors, so it has also this nice variety that makes it feel more special. And I think that's ultimately the true testament to Anne Rice's legacy. And yeah, I really, really hope they manage to stick the landing with the entire saga. I'm a bit scared having seen the first season. I think the first season, Vampire Lestat, is very fun, but also it's starting to get into very dangerous territory of, it takes a long time to make these shows. It becomes a soap opera of sorts. So even regardless of how it's going to end, satisfying or unsatisfying, we will always have those two seasons. We will always have the book, and honestly, we will always have the movie. They all have value, they all have virtue, and they're all worth experiencing. So I'm really really happy we managed to finally talk about all of this, reappraising and Rice's work, and also having fun talking about those two other adaptations. Carson, thank you so much for joining me. Would you like to plug anything for our listeners? Where they find you?
Yeah, if you want to find me, the best place is on Clappercast. I host a podcast also where we review old cinema, new cinema, just kind of random stuff. We're finishing out the summer, so we're finishing our Hot Bond summer where we've looked at James Bond films. We have an ongoing Best Picture Rewind series ahead of Oscars 100 where we're looking at Best Picture winners. Myself and Jakob Flash, who is often on this podcast, we just talked about From Here to Eternity, Pretty soon we're talking about Ben-Hur, so that's very exciting. And then, Jack, Nick, everyone who's on here, Hillary, they're all also on there. So if you want to hear more of my thoughts and more of everyone's thoughts on film, that's a good place to find it.
Absolutely. You can find links to Clappercast below and everywhere on Spotify and all the other platforms. Meanwhile, you can follow me at NikiGrind97, pretty much on everywhere, primarily Letterboxd and Instagram at this point. And of course, you can follow the show on Instagram at Anatomy of Adaptation Pod to stay up to date with all past and future episodes. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a lovely, lovely day, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.